Pray with me. Dad, I need your help this morning. Because I'm not a public speaker. But I know that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Father, would you give me the words to share this morning? The words, Father, that are in your heart, not mine. Amen. When Pastor asked me to speak, I've been working on a message. And I said, wow, what an opportunity I could share that word. And God said, no. I don't want you to do that. I want you to share only about the ministry. Nothing else. And I said, but Lord, I have time to fill it. And he said, you'll be able to fill it because you like to talk about that. And he's right, I do. I enjoy it. Megan, thank you for that worship. It was awesome. It was great. I had a hard time back there not being able to sing. Back at one. Folks, that's food for us. View those videos. Take the time. View the videos. I want to acknowledge Rachel this morning, our board member, being here to help support us. Between myself and Brenda and Rachel, we have half of our board here this morning. The rest of them have obligations they couldn't be here. And I appreciate everything my board does because without the board's help, we could not do what we do without the help of them. They keep me in line because Brenda knows I just give all the money away to one need if necessary. So, normally I get to share with you little tiny tidbits about what's going on in the different ministries as updates come. But this morning I want to give you a little bit more in-depth on each of the ministries. So I'm going to begin with Rescue and Restore. Rescue and Restore in Chennai, India is exactly what their name says. They rescue children that live on the streets of Chennai for one reason or another. Now realize in some countries, the word we use as orphans doesn't necessarily mean the child doesn't have parents. It just means they're on the streets. In third world countries, they become poor and they can't afford to take care of all their children. So they just send them out into the streets to live. Rescue and Restore's goal is to take in children off the streets, give them food, clothing, shelter, and education. And then if the family desires later on in life, restore that relationship and return them back to their families. Many of the children that have been through this program have gone on in life, gotten married, got higher education. Some of them even have come back to work for Rescue and Restore. So I met Freddie and Daisy, and they're the two on the far left over there, sitting on the ground. My very first trip to India in 2002. And we got to go see the work they do firsthand in the streets and in the slums of India, places you wouldn't want to go. People ask me, you go to India, how is the Taj Mahal? I don't know, I've never seen it. I don't go to that part. I go to the part where Mom is sitting on the ground cooking dinner and there's raw sewage running right down here. That's where we go. We go where the children are. During our visit there with Freddie shared the desire to have property in a home of their own because they rent homes, and there's this really strange law in India that if somebody lives in your house for more than 5 years, they can claim ownership. So consequently, every 3 to 4 years, they have to move the children's home. The home they're in now is really beautiful. It's a Christian gentleman that's renting it to them. He's charging them a whole $1 a year. But Freddie has always desired to own their own place. He shared with me how him and his father gathered up $5,000 and purchased a piece of land. And when they went down to transfer title, they found out that the gentleman that sold them that piece of property didn't own it. It was actually government land. So they were out $5,000. They could no longer find this gentleman. So we committed with Freddie that we were going to pray over that. We sat down at a restaurant, Freddie and Daisy, myself and Tim Ditmore, and we drew out on a napkin a dream of a home, another building that would be for staff, for visitors. If Pastor Tony wanted to go visit, he'd have a place to stay. And we've been praying that since 2002. And last year, God provided a piece of land. God provided 3.5 acres of walled-in property. One of the acres was purchased by Youth with a Mission. The remaining land was given to Freddie and Daisy on a 75-year lease for free. That's pretty much giving your property away. I mean, 75 years isn't going to last that long. They've actually put on the lease, my mind went blank. My nieces. Freddie and Daisy's young daughters. So that when Freddie and Daisy move on and are in heaven, the lease can be continued to the girls so that the ministry can go on. Recently, they've had to change the name of their ministry from Rescue and Restore. Not so much the name, but what they do. Because the government has become very strict on who can do what in the area. So they are now known as YWAM, Youth with a Mission, Rescue and Restore, and they do humanitarian aid. Because that fits in with what the government wants. Another reason that they needed to build on this property is the government came to them, told them that in this nice home that they have, they wanted a separate entrance for the boys and the girls. So we spent money, we built outside stairs and an entrance to the home. You know, the boys in the downstairs and the girls are upstairs, so the girls could go up the stairs and go in, and the boys weren't allowed in there. 3 months later, the government came and said, no, you need separate homes for the boys and girls, and you need to do it now. You need to move out. Well, thanks for the warning. So when they received this property, shortly after that, they met with the government, and the government said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you time to build. We're going to work with you. I didn't want to take the time to show you the video because it's kind of lengthy, but there's this dirt road that goes out of town to where the property is to build this new facility on. And one morning, Freddie and Daisy and his team were going to go out there and pray, and they noticed that at the edge of the city, all the way out to the property, the road had been paved. The local government heard what was going on, and they came out and they paved the road. So this is the artist concept of the girls' home. Originally, the girls' home, separately on the property, was going to house 30 girls. That's the concept of the boys' home. Same deal, 30 boys. Brings us up to 60 children that could be rescued off of the street. There were bonuses on this property. One of them was coconuts that they could sell and eat. The land needed to be cleared for development. They burnt up the trees to clean up the lower branches, and then they brought in tractors and leveled the ground, got it all cleared, ready for building. Now they're going to separate the boys and the girls' home. They're not going to be together. They're going to be on separate areas of the property with other things in the center, which I will share with you. Why am I doing that? There. So when they received the property, this building was the only existing building on the property. First project was to remodel that and use that for storage for equipment. And then there was no gate to guard the property. So we sent money over and we purchased a gate and had it installed for security. On the property there was a well. You can see the top of the well right there. That's what the water looked like in the well. It hadn't been used in a long time. There was a lot of debris, a lot of garbage, a lot of stuff in the well, so they cleaned it out and they had the well tested. They dug the well deeper because it was determined that it needed to be deeper so that it would hold more water to be able to provide enough water for the home. So they dug it deeper. They had the water tested. The water tested out is good enough to drink by their standards in India. I wouldn't drink it. Wouldn't recommend it. The next step was, even though there was already power lines installed on the property, power needed to be brought to the property. So power was installed to the property. It was determined that the well, even though it was good water, was not going to be able to produce enough water to accommodate the plans and the visions for later in life on the property. So we drilled a second well, which also has very good water. Those you should recognize, because this church took up an offering to provide those bricks to start building of the homes. Then they started digging the foundation footing and began doing foundations. They did the footings. All this stuff's dug by hand. Just old school. Mix of cement, old school. Meticulous work they do over there, though. The first building that they started working on was the home for staff and workers, because they knew they were going to have a place for staff to live. And that building is going to be placed partially between the two homes so that it's easy access. What you're seeing here is the building of that actual home. Sharon Ditmore and her son were over there, I think last year, year and a half. They actually got to see this building being started. It is now finished. It's ready to be housed. It's ready for people to move in. It's ready for staff to do their thing. There's no furnishings in it, but the building is ready to be inhabited. And obviously the landscaping's not done around it or any of that kind of stuff. That's the interior tile work, the flooring. They do everything over there with excellence, just gorgeous tile. So the next project was to build the girls' home. Remember I told you that the girls' home was going to house 30 children? in the process of beginning to do the home, the building, the builder came to them and said, you know, our staff loves the work that you guys are doing. We like to hear what you're doing with children. And our staff has decided that if you can come up with the materials, we'll double the size of this building for no extra labor. So the girls' home that they are currently finished with, and you'll see that in a second, is now going to house 60 girls. And the boys' home will house 60 boys, giving us now 120 children till we can take off the streets. That's one view. That is the finished girls' home right there. It is completed and ready for the girls to move in. Off to the left of that picture, you can see the home there for the staff and workers. Tile work in the girls' home. Real life toilets even. They are now in the process of building the boys' home. They plan to finish sometime this summer, and they are believing that God will bring in the rest of the money so that they can pay everything off and move in to those homes the end of this year. So what is the future for Rescue and Restore? Well, their goal is to bring on more staff, more workers. Obviously, they want to bring more children. More children means more money. But their desire is to fill that home with 120 children. Then they want to start raise money to build on that piece of property a school. They have desired a school for the children, and the local government has come to them and has asked them if they would be willing to build a school, because there is no good school for the local children in that village. They have to be bused out to go to school. So that is their next goal in life, is to move the children in and then start on a school. Next ministry I want to share with you is Upendo feeding program. Upendo in Swahili means love. This feeding ministry was started by Pastor Paul. That's him and his family there. It's his wife Mary, awesome worship leader, if you like Swahili and African style worship. And then now there's the little children, Beatrice, Michael Jr., and I can't remember the baby's name. It's right on the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry. Pastor Paul contacted us through our website. Just sent us a simple email saying, hey, I saw on your website that you have this ministry. Hey, send us some money. Yeah, if only it was that simple. Because with our ministry, we verify all ministries. We don't send money to just anybody. That's one of the reasons that our ministry was started, because we had seen so much fraud when we traveled to India. We saw people that had given, we'd heard stories of people that have given to ministries only to find out that the ministry never really was there. The money was just taken. And so we started this ministry to give and help children, but only to ministries that we could verify were valid, so that when people like you give, you know that your money is going to what you want it to. So we prayed as a board. We had interest in this ministry because what Paul does is they feed boys that live on the streets of Kitale, Kenya. These children, their only food supply is dumpsters. And Paul shared with us how he was feeding these young boys one meal once a week, which is better than nothing. And we made many, many, many attempts to verify Paul's ministry by recommendations from him and people that knew him. And we heard great reports. But nobody was ever actually able to give us the information we wanted about that particular ministry. We heard about the church. We heard about Tamara's home that they were building on the property to house battered women. We heard about the school. We heard about all the outreaches they did. But nobody could send us any information on the actual Upindo feeding program. And that's our criteria to be able to send money to this ministry. So against my wishes, God told us we were going to Africa. I thought he said Italy. It was Africa. So Tim Ditmore and I boarded an airplane because I told God, I'll go to India and I'll go to Myanmar, but I ain't going to Africa by myself. I want somebody big to go with me. So Tim and I went, and we were immediately at the airport greeted by an amazing man of God. We were greeted by Paul and Mary, and when we first met, it was like, I don't know, we'd been friends forever. We already knew each other. We made the long journey back to their small village. Long journey, dirt roads. You think roller coasters are fun? Try riding on the roads. I'm kidding you. Because even though they drive on this side, well, if there's a pothole here, they drive on this side. Well, there's cars coming. They'll get out of the way. Don't worry about it. I rode like this quite a bit when we were going places. When we arrived at their community, we saw the respect the people there had for Paul. Other pastors in the area, and there's a lot of churches in that area, they referred to him as Bishop Paul. They were actually having a revival meeting, and while we were in the car, they were having a revival at one of these other churches, and Paul turned to Tim and he said, Tim, do you have a word for the people? Tim says, well, yeah, I got all kinds of messages here. He goes, fine. He gets on the phone and he calls the leadership of this revival meeting, and he says, I have your next speaker. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Who does that? So we walk into the building. Tim's putting on his nice shirt, and we go in, and they're greeting us, and they're saying, okay, well, brother so-and-so is supposed to speak next, but you go before him. I don't know about the rest of you, but if I was supposed to go next, I'm going next. And Tim got up there, and he spoke. And the brother that spoke after him, their messages did this. But you see, the respect that people had for Paul, they allowed Paul, they believed that he knew God enough that they allowed him to alter their plans. We actually got to spend time with each one of these ministers in the area, the pastors, the pastor of the church where they were doing the feeding ministry. And they began to unfold for us all the work that Paul and Mary do. And they began to unfold for us this great ministry of how children living in poverty were being reached by Paul. Because he doesn't just feed them food. That's their living conditions. He feeds them the Word. Before they get food, they get the Word. Now, I don't know if you noticed that young boy's bottle that he had in that last picture. That young boy has a bottle. Those are not drinks. They might be empty drink bottles. But those bottles have glue in them. And these young boys sniff this glue to stop the pains of hunger. So these boys are high most of the time. While we were there, Paul shared with me how the ministry started. He was walking downtown Catania in Catali one day, and a young boy came to him off the streets and said, would you buy me lunch? And Paul's heart broke because he didn't have any money. So as he was walking, he found a friend of his walking down the street, and he asked his friend, "Would you give me some money for this shirt so I can buy that young boy lunch?" He sold the shirt off of his back to help a young boy get food. That birthed a burden in Paul. And he began to put things together, and it began to grow to 75 to 90 boys every week showing up for food at the cost of $2.50. Very expensive to feed these children. I say expensive, $2.50 for a meal, because we can feed children in India for 35 cents. $2.50 is quite a bit of money. So we knew then and there God was directing us to help support that ministry by what we saw and the work that we saw. When COVID hit, the restaurants and the hotels all shut down. Well, that's where they were getting their food. They were getting their meals from restaurants and hotels. So they decided to take the money and go to the grocery store and buy loaves of bread, milk, fruit juices, and hand those out to the boys for food. Figuring if the bread would last more than one day, they would at least have something they could eat, something in their stomachs, and that would help with their hunger. With this also came the need for masks, because COVID's rampant there. You saw a picture up there of Paul holding up some masks. He found a lady in his local village that was making masks, and she offered to sell Paul masks for $1 a piece. So far to date, we've been able to provide 300 masks, because they don't last very long over there. Because we don't get dirty like those kids do. You saw their living conditions. Those masks don't live very long. Also during that time, because of COVID, and to keep the numbers of boys down that they can feed, because when word gets out that there's free food, they come from everywhere. But Paul also knows that he has a budget. If that's for me, I'm busy. Paul knew that he has a budget. So what they have done is they have, one, changed locations week to week, and two, changed days of the week that they feed. So it'll be a Monday one week in this spot. It'll be a Wednesday the next week over here. Or it might be Friday over here. I asked Paul about that. I said, "How do the children find you?" He goes, "Oh, they find me. They know." But if we stay in one place, we're going to have 200 children. We don't have the money for that. And Paul's heart is not to turn anybody away. He'll find a way to feed the children. He'll find a way to give everybody food. They have such a heart for these children and all of the other ministries they run. Their church. They have a school. You guys are aware of your church. You were a big part in helping with their remodel. So they continue the battle of feeding children with the little money that we're able to send every month. I'm grateful to be able to feed the Word of God to these young boys. And I keep referring to them as boys is because there's another ministry that already does girls. The girls and the boys don't live together on the street for obvious reasons. You know? So there's an area where the girls live and there's an area where the boys live. And so there's another ministry that is going in and doing a girls' feeding program. So they're not left out. So what is their future? What is their hopes and dreams? Well, first, for Upindu, they desire to have the funding to be able to feed these children one meal every day of the week, or even more. Because you see, one meal is helpful per week. So it's at least something on their stomach. I don't know how many of you tried fasting and giving up food for a week. See, the difference is we have food in the refrigerator. And if we're fasting and we get hungry, peanut butter and jelly. They don't have that option. It's go to the dumpsters or go to the store and steal what they can steal. Or discarded food in the dumpster. Which with the restaurants closed, there's less of that. So their desire is to be able to feed these children every day. Their second desire is to start up a home. You pen new home. On the church property, there's already a building. Because at one point we'd already started the home, but for reasons, it was closed down. But our desire is to restart that. There's property there. There's already articles of incorporation set up with the Kenyan government. There's already officers in place. Everything's there. What do they lack? Money. I hate that word. Estimate to run that home would be a budget of about $500 a month. And they'd be able to house a family that would take care of these children and 6 boys. We're believing with them that shortly God's going to provide that money through somebody or some business that's willing to say, I can give up $500 a month to provide food, clothes, shelter, housing, and schooling for 6 young boys, and maybe larger eventually. Helping Hands Children's Home in Myanmar. That's where my heart is right now, is in Myanmar. Once again, Nang contacted us through our webpage and said, we have a children's home in Myanmar. Can you send us some money? And I said, sure, why not? We knew nobody that knew anybody in Myanmar. Where is Myanmar? Where is this country at? It was formerly known as Burma. Well, it's right off the border of China. A little tiny country, about this big. So I started doing some investigation and I asked, is it safe for us to visit there? Because they're a democratic country. They have a president. She's running the country. So yeah, it's perfectly safe. Come on over. So we decided we were going to go visit this home. Now Nang started this home with his sisters. Nang was an evangelist in his own country. Nang walked from village to village. And I'm talking through countryside. I'm not talking nice paved roads that he walked on with sidewalks. He walked through brush. He walked through creeks. Nang walked the countryside from village to village, spreading the gospel. And during those visits to those different little villages in his country, he noticed that there were a lot of children that were just living out in the wilderness. Orphaned children. Children that, again, parents couldn't afford to take care of, or they just had one parent. Maybe mom couldn't afford, she's got a job, but it only pays enough for her to have food. So Nang felt a burden, and he felt that God was telling him to rescue some of these children. So he rented a truck. A little truck with some sideboards. It was a flatbed, had sideboards on it. And he went through the countryside. And he gathered up 16 children. Now, these are not the same 16 children I visited, except for that young boy with his hand raised. When I was there in 2013, That young boy was 5 years old. His name is Saul Manna. He became my buddy. We went to Myanmar in 2013, and I had the privilege to spend all of my time that I was there with these children. They prepare meals together. They do everything together. They study together. They're more like a family than an orphanage or a children's home. Because when I was there, and Saul was this big, the girls treated him like their little boy. They mothered him. He didn't have to do anything. They'd bring him his food. He'd cut it up for him. I'm like, are they going to chew it for him too? Or they mothered him. They loved him like their own. We also got to walk the children to school. At that time, the children, I'll try and put this kindly, especially since it's being taped. You have to pay to go to school in Myanmar. You have to pay for uniforms, you have to pay for books, and you have to pay to go to school. And the teachers would tell the children, okay, next week, you need to bring $100 with you to come to school. And the orphans would show up, they don't have any money. Well, how dare you come to school without bringing me my $100? Because it wasn't going to the school, it was going to the teacher. And they ridiculed these kids because they were orphans. They didn't treat them well. They didn't give them a good education, so Nang moved them. He moved them to another school. He explained their situation. Now these children that live in these villages, because they have no money, they can't go to school. So consequently, they are behind in their studies. When we receive the kids, they're behind in their studies. But I'm happy to tell you that since these children have been taken into the home and got an education, they've caught up to their grade levels. Some of them have even exceeded their grade levels. Right now, because of COVID, there's no school. So they're still studying at home. Some of the children are learning Japanese. Some want to learn more English. They learn English in school. There's 2 kids that want to learn Korean. So they've been learning Korean off of YouTube. We can't even get our kids to go to Zoom school. We can't even get our kids to pay attention. These kids desire more. Some of the children have actually received academic awards in school. Orphan children, outcasts in their society. And now they're receiving awards in school. See, their daily activity in the home every morning is when they get up, they have Bible study. Individual Bible study. And when they come downstairs for breakfast, they're asked, what did you read today? What was your scripture passage about? What did you get from it? They prepare breakfast and they eat breakfast. And they go to school. They come home, they do their studies. They play like children do. And then at night, they have Bible study. Corporate Bible study where they all get together and the Word is shared. And then they have worship. Worship like I've never witnessed until I went to see them. Those 16 children, 16 of them worship God simply because He's God. Recently, the current government, back in February, well, let's back up a little bit. In November, they had an election, just like we did. Now, years ago, Burma used to be under military rule. On February 3rd of this year, the military decided that they did not like the outcome of the election. They said that the election was fraudulent. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the military went to the president's house and 3 of her cabinet members, and they kidnapped them. And the military formed a military coup and took back over the government. Martial law has been declared. They can't go out. The banks are closed. The shops are mostly closed. If you can buy food, it's 3 times what it was back in January and February. These are actual pictures. These are not the pictures you'll find here in the United States of what's going on in Myanmar. Those are actual pictures sent to me by Nang's family. There is violence going on. That jet you saw was dropping bombs in their own cities. I have videos that they've sent to me that I couldn't share with you of people standing in the streets and military, because these kids are protesting, are shooting them and killing them. Our press tells us they're shooting with rubber bullets. You don't die from rubber bullets. Myanmar needs God. They need that military to back down. These children are fighting for their lives. The video you watched at the beginning of the children singing, I have been able to contact them. There is no internet, except for between 9 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. They're allowed limited internet access, has no Facebook, certain sites are blocked, but we can Zoom, we can meet on Zoom. There's no cell phone usage. They shut the cell phones down. If you want a cell phone, you go to the government, you get one of their SIM cards so that they can see what you're doing, who you're talking to. Unfortunately, because the banks are closed, we have no way of sending money to them right now. They're cut off. That breaks my heart. Fortunately, right before this coup took over, something prompted, and I know it's the Lord, I say something, but prompted Nang's sister to go to the bank and take all the money that they'd had set aside for different projects and take it out and go buy rice. And she reported to me the other day when I got to speak with her briefly, very briefly, that she was able to go out and buy some more rice at 3 times the price. The song you saw those children sing, they sang to me, February 28th, after the military coup. Now, they've been going out banging pots and pans. They've ruined some pots and pans, demonstrating, making noise. But the military has tightened up, and now they don't want anybody out on the streets. So they're not allowed to go out. They're fearful for their lives. Nang's father contacted Nang and said, should we move? Should we leave the city? Should we go? And Nang's response was, well, you'll probably be killed trying to flee the city. So no, stay where you're at. But that song those children sang to me when we had a Zoom meeting, I want to give you a rough translation of what they sang. The song says, I never feel sorrow for my days before or the things getting worse in my life. Although my house might not be nice, I have a roof and I'm good. I feel better than before because I have a house in paradise. As Jesus gave his life and died on the cross for me, my being poor will never compare to what Jesus went through. While I am in different times, I don't worry about the future. Although I live in a house where the roof is not good and the rains come into my house, I'm still thanking God. Even though in the winter seasons, when it's cold and I do not have a warm jacket, I am still thanking God. Although I do not have my own house, I am grateful for the one I have to stay. Although I live in a rented house, I feel everything is okay because everything is temporary. And we complain because the cable goes out for an hour. I'm still a firm believer, and this is a freebie, everybody should have to go on a mission trip. So what are their future plans? Who knows? Other than God. Their first future plan is for safety. To be able to continue to help these children and to help more children in the future. The second future plan is, and I just found this out myself a few weeks ago, at one point Nang owned a piece of land in the village that he originally was born in. And he sold that piece of land and they purchased another piece of land on the edge of Yangon. And their desire is to build a home for those children. To build a home to minister, because they do in-home church. That is their church. Families from the community come to a home and they meet in a home. I know I've given you a lot of information this morning on different things and the things that God is doing. What I want to let you know is during this time of COVID-19, and even earlier, God has been so faithful to all the little children ministries. As you see, I have a little confession. After going through cancer, the loss of my mom, the loss of Brenda's mom, and this COVID thing. You know, if you go to our webpage, it tells you that we will send out a newsletter once a quarter. But because of all of these distractions, we have not sent out a newsletter in over a year and a half, almost 2 years. But God still brings in the money. We've lost some donors. People's lives changed. They can't give anymore. Pastor Tony knows how that feels. The church is in the same situation. People come and go. People give, people don't give. We know nobody's going to give to us forever. But we've lost donors. But God has made up the difference. We lack nothing in our checking account. If we could get money to Myanmar, we could send it to them today. If they had an emergency, a medical emergency, we have money to send for that. Because God is the foundation of our ministry. Not me. Not Mike, not Rachel. Not Mark, who we lost in November to Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. Not Sue, his wife. Not Brenda. But God is the foundation. This is God's ministry. We're just the vessel He's using. He's faithful. I know you've heard people say it before. He's faithful. He is faithful. Because He told me, and I've questioned at times, are you sure you told me to start this ministry? Well, if He hadn't, why would He fund it? God supplies. When He calls you to do something, when He tells you to do something, it's His bill. He always supplies. When God tells you to run a food ministry down there, He supplies. When God tells you to sit here in a church on the top of a hill in a dark area like this that we live in, it's anti-God, He supplies. The lights are on in this building. The heater works. Stage looks cool. Thanks, Christine. God supplies all of our needs according to His riches and glory. Not my needs. I don't supply anything. If I have a need, God gives it to me. I don't have to go digging for it. But we have to believe Him for that. So what's next for all the little children ministries? We're believing that God is going to expand our tents. We're going to move our tent stakes out. God's going to bring us more donors, more people to make donations to the ministry. You've heard me say it before, and I'll continue to say it until I can't talk anymore. A lot of people don't realize out there in the world, in third world countries, how far $5 of the United States money goes. $5! You can't even buy a drink at Starbucks for $5. I can call them $5. But we believe God is going to extend us so that we can provide more money for the 3 ministries that we already support. And branch out to other ministries. I have the Philippines on my heart. I have for years. Why, I don't know. But there's just something about the Philippines. We know that eventually we're going to do more ministries, but right now, the resources aren't there. So how can you help? You know, we're all called to be missionaries. Whether you like it or not, you're a missionary. Because you're called to go out on the highways and the byways. And when you talk to that person in the line in front of you, in the store, you're being a missionary. Because people judge you by your words and your actions. Everybody can give something to somebody. We sit here in a church and we confess that everything we have belongs to the Lord. Everything, but don't touch this. Everything but this is mine. Well, in my favorite TV show. And I'm not up here asking you guys to give to me this morning. I'm really not. What I'm saying is we have missionaries, and they all have needs. But here's what I am asking you to do. On our table in the back, we have brochures. Information about every ministry that we help support, about our ministry. We have postcards. Oh, wait. We have postcards for our $5 challenge, challenging people to just send us $5 a month. These things need to be mailed out. Our board, we've gotten together and we spoke to everybody we know in our circles of life about our ministry. We've done everything we can physically think of on our own to reach out to get people to donate. But I know each one of you know other people. You all know somebody that you can mail this to, or you can mail this to. You can email people and say, hey, are you interested in missions? There's a great ministry that's helping children around the world, and here's how you can help. They're only looking for $5. Or more if you want to give that. What I'm asking you to do this morning is not put money in an offering plate. I'm asking you to take some time and get some of these flyers, these brochures. If I run out, I can get more printed. Take some of these cards. Invest in a stamp. Invest in a phone call. Invest in an email and say, hey, this is coming your way. Just take time to look at it. Because God's faithful. And these things are going to fall into some hands of people that are willing to give. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for your help today to expand our donor base through people that you know. The more people we can reach. Father, I thank you for this time you've given to me, for Pastor allowing me to take this time slot to share in more depth what you're doing through a ministry called All the Little Children Ministries. And not just 6 board members, but you're doing through those donors that we have, Father, that are faithful to provide money to us every month. And yes, Father, we're thankful for those people that are only able to give $5 or $10, because $5 or $10, Father, put together with somebody else's $5 or $10, becomes larger sums of money. Father, I ask you that we would take these words that I've shared this morning, we would take them to heart. And Father, that when we leave here, we would enter the mission field together to reach not only children across the world, but the community we live in. Amen.